In the final days of his life, Chuck Norris appeared exactly as the world had always known him, calm, composed, and firmly in control of his image. On his 86th birthday, he shared a message that reflected gratitude, strength, and a continued commitment to staying active. There was a sense of reassurance in his words, as if nothing in his world was uncertain. For decades, he had built a reputation not just as an action star, but as someone who embodied discipline and resilience. That message felt like a continuation of that identity, something familiar and steady for those who had followed him over the years. What made that moment significant wasn't just what he said, but what it represented. There was no hint of concern, no visible sign that anything might change. To his audience, it felt like another chapter in a long, consistent life. The tone was relaxed, even slightly humorous at times, reinforcing the image people had come to expect. In hindsight, that normalcy became the most striking detail. It showed how quickly circumstances can shift, even when everything appears stable on the surface. Less than 10 days later, the situation changed in a way no one had anticipated. While staying at his home in Hawaii, something occurred that disrupted that sense of stability. The details were never fully disclosed, which added a layer of uncertainty to the situation. It was described only as a sudden medical emergency, a phrase that explained everything and nothing at the same time. For someone whose life had been so visible, the lack of specific information felt unusual. This absence of clarity shifted attention away from facts and toward speculation, though official sources remained quiet. What made it more unsettling was how quickly events unfolded. There was no gradual buildup, no warning signs shared publicly. Instead, the narrative moved abruptly from normal life to a critical situation. That sudden transition made it difficult for people to fully process what had happened. According to those who had been in contact with him that day, there were no visible signs that anything was wrong. He was described as being in good spirits, engaging in conversation, and behaving as he normally would. This detail became one of the most discussed aspects of the situation because it contrasted so sharply with what followed. It suggested that whatever occurred happened quickly and without clear warning. Moments like this often highlight how unpredictable life can be. Even in situations where everything appears stable, change can happen instantly. For someone like Norris, whose public image was built around strength and control, that unpredictability felt even more striking. It reminded people that no matter how consistent a life may seem, there are always elements that remain beyond control. He was taken to a nearby hospital where medical teams began handling the situation. From that point forward, updates became limited. There were no detailed reports released to the public and no extended timeline of events. This lack of information created a sense of distance between what was happening and what people could understand. In many high-profile cases, there is a steady flow of updates, allowing the public to follow along. But in this situation, that wasn't the case. The silence that followed made the outcome feel even more sudden. Without a gradual progression of information, the final news arrived without the context people often rely on to process events. By the next day, the confirmation came. Chuck Norris had passed away. The statement released by his family was carefully worded, focusing on his role within the family rather than the circumstances of his passing. They described him as a devoted husband, a loving father, and a deeply connected grandfather. One detail stood out more than anything else. They emphasized that he was surrounded by loved ones in his final moments. That detail shifted the focus away from unanswered questions and toward something more meaningful. It highlighted the personal side of his life, something that often remained in the background compared to his public image. As the initial shock began to settle, attention gradually turned toward his legacy. This included not only his career but also the financial structure he had built over time. Estimates placed his net worth at around $70 million, a number that reflected decades of work across multiple industries. At first glance, it seemed like a straightforward result of a successful acting career. However, a closer look revealed that his wealth was built through a combination of different strategies. It wasn't tied to a single source of income, but rather a network of systems designed to support long-term stability. His early career in film played an important role in establishing his public image. Movies like The Delta Force helped define his position in the action genre. These roles brought recognition and steady work, allowing him to build a foundation in the entertainment industry. However, these films were only part of the story. While they contributed to his success, they did not fully explain the scale of his financial stability. That came later when he made a transition that would reshape his career in a more sustainable way. That transition came through television, specifically with Walker, Texas Ranger. The show ran for several years and produced a large number of episodes. This volume played a significant role in its long-term impact. More importantly, it created ongoing revenue through syndication. Even after the show ended, it continued to generate income through reruns. This allowed his earnings to continue without requiring new projects, creating a stable financial foundation. This type of income structure is often overlooked. While many actors rely on continuous work, Norris had built something more consistent. The royalties from his television career provided a steady stream of income over time. This approach reduced financial uncertainty and allowed him to step back from active work without losing stability. It showed a level of planning that extended beyond short-term success. Outside of entertainment, he had already developed another source of income through martial arts. His system, Chun Kuk Do, expanded into a network of instructors and programs. This allowed him to generate income while also building a lasting legacy within the martial arts community. It was both a personal achievement and a business model, continuing in the same paired A/B documentary-style natural tone and monetization-safe approach. As his martial arts system expanded, it became clear that it was more than just a personal discipline. Chun Kuk Do evolved into a structured organization with certified instructors, training programs, and international reach. This allowed it to operate independently of his daily involvement, turning his personal expertise into a scalable system. Over time, it built a reputation not only for technique, but for the philosophy behind it: discipline, consistency, and control. That transformation made it financially sustainable in a way many personal brands are not. Instead of relying on appearances or one-time events, the system generated ongoing income through licensing and instruction. It also extended his influence into communities that may never have engaged with his film or television work. In that sense, it became both a business and a legacy platform, reinforcing his identity beyond entertainment. His approach to business did not stop there. One of the most notable examples of his long-term thinking was his ranch in Texas. What began as a private property eventually revealed a different kind of opportunity when a natural aquifer was discovered beneath the land. This discovery shifted the purpose of the property from residential to commercial potential. That potential led to the creation of a bottled water business, turning a natural resource into a structured enterprise. Unlike short-term endorsement deals, this type of venture was tied directly to ownership and production. It allowed him to generate income from something tangible and renewable, adding another layer of stability to his overall financial structure. Over time, these different income streams began to form a cohesive system. Television royalties, martial arts licensing, business ventures, and endorsements all contributed to a diversified portfolio. Each element played a different role, balancing risk and ensuring that no single source defined his financial position. This kind of diversification is often associated with long-term planning. It reduces dependence on any one industry and allows for greater flexibility. In his case, it meant that even as his public appearances became less frequent, his income remained steady. The system continued to function quietly in the background. When attention turned to his estate, one aspect stood out immediately: organization. Reports suggested that his financial affairs had been arranged well in advance, leaving little room for confusion. The structure appeared clear, with 6 primary beneficiaries identified. This level of clarity is not always common, especially in cases involving significant wealth and complex family histories. In many situations, unclear planning can lead to disputes or delays. Here, however, the early indications pointed toward a process that had already been understood by those involved. At the center of that structure was his wife, who had shared in both his personal life and many of his business decisions. Her role extended beyond family, connecting directly to some of the ventures that contributed to his overall wealth. Alongside her were his 5 children, each representing a different phase of his life. These relationships were shaped by different circumstances, timelines, and experiences. Bringing them together under one estate structure required careful consideration and balance. His younger children grew up during a period when he had already achieved financial stability. Their experience of him was likely very different from that of his older children, who had seen the earlier stages of his career. These differences added complexity to the overall family dynamic. Despite those differences, the estate appeared to treat each of them as part of a unified system. There was no indication of separation or prioritization based on timing. Instead, the structure suggested an effort to maintain fairness across all relationships. One story within the family stood out more than the others: a daughter who came into his life much later after years of separation and distance. Her connection to him began not through shared history but through a decision to reach out. That moment marked the beginning of a relationship that developed over time. What could have remained distant instead became meaningful. By the time of his passing, she was not viewed as separate from the rest of the family, but as an integral part of it. This inclusion reflects a broader pattern in how his life evolved. Rather than leaving past chapters unresolved, there was an effort to bring them into alignment. It suggests that personal decisions were approached with the same level of consideration as his financial ones. In many families, situations like this can lead to division or tension. The fact that this did not appear to happen publicly indicates that those complexities were addressed privately, long before they could become larger issues. Looking at his life as a whole, a consistent theme begins to emerge: structure. Whether in martial arts, business, or personal relationships, there was a clear emphasis on discipline and long-term thinking. This approach influenced not just how he lived, but how he prepared for the future. Even when unexpected elements appeared, they were eventually incorporated into a broader system. That ability to adapt while maintaining stability is often what defines lasting success, both financially and personally. In the end, his legacy is not defined by a single achievement or number. It is shaped by the combination of everything he built over time: his career, his businesses, and his relationships. Each element contributed to a larger picture that continued to evolve throughout his life. What remains is not just the story of success, but the structure behind it. A life that included complexity and change still resulted in a clear and balanced outcome. And perhaps that is what makes it stand out: the way everything was ultimately brought together with intention and clarity.